Hey guys, Chris from Black Flag Barbell Club here. As you can see, today we're going to be talking about block pulls. Block pulls are a tool. They're useful for some, not useful for others. Different situations, they are pretty good. Block pulls, you're basically trying to mimic where you would be if you had lifted the bar off the ground and it was at this height. So in this case, we're using a 10 centimeter block. So the goal is to set up and be in the position that you'd be in if you had lifted the bar 10 centimeters off the ground and then lift from there. The issue a lot of people seem to have with block pulls is that they don't do that. They set up as if it's its own lift. They don't really put forward the technique that they do into an actual deadlift because it's easier if it's off the block. It's not always easier. Some people find it much harder. But it's important that if you want it to transfer to your actual deadlift, that you make it as similar as possible, position to position. So what we're going to show you from the side is, number one, not to sit too far into it. Don't use too much depth in the hip and the knee. Number two, you should be taking the slack out of the bar just like you do in a regular deadlift. And number three, you should be using your legs and your hips to sort of scissor together and drive that bar up. Yeah, so just because it's on the blocks doesn't mean that you're really just focusing on being a big lever through the back. You want to make sure that you're still getting all that together. Okay, so we'll move the camera to the side and we'll hopefully be able to show you those three things. Alright guys, we're on the side. As I said, we're going to go through number one, make sure you're in the same position as if you'd lifted up that bar off the ground and it was that height. Number two, make sure you're just not using your back, use your hips and your legs. Number three, taking the tension out. So make sure you're in the same position. A lot of people will tend to either start a little too high or a little too low. So if this is where I'm going to start my block pull from, we'll usually see people go a little too low, try and get a bit more leg drive in it, or they'll start way too high and they've got not enough leg drive. So if you're X amount of height off the ground, and it depends on the block you're using. If you're using a really high block, it's going to be a lot more hip drive in, not so much leg drive. If you're using a lower block, you're still going to have a lot of leg drive to use, and you should. So with a 10 centimeter block, I've still got some room for leg drive. So when I'm pulling off this block, after I take the tension out and I've set my position, I'm still driving through my feet, so I'm trying to get my quads in on the action. I'm still squeezing my hamstrings and my butt in. So we're going to get this sort of coming together closing motion. Yeah, so it's both. It's not one or the other, it's both. You're going to use both in the deadlift, you're going to use both here. Okay? So it's going to look a little something like this. Everything else is the same stance, same grip, same bracing. So everything's nice and smooth, you're feeling quad, hamstring, glute. Not one or the other, all three. So step number two, we are going to make sure we're taking the tension out of the bar, the slack out of the bar, same way we would in a regular deadlift. Okay, so before you lift it, you should be taking, if there's 160 on the bar, you should be taking some of that weight, some of that slack out of the bar. You'll hear like a little ting or a little movement of the bar. It's just the slack between the bar and the collar and the plates. You want to take that slack out so that you're already a little bit loaded. You've got load in your system, so it's not just going to go from 0 to 100 when you start to lift. Okay? So the main way that you would achieve this is by pushing through your feet, almost to try and raise yourself up, elongate your arms, take the slack out of the bar. You'll feel it load you up, and then you can just keep going to lock out. When you're learning, it's very useful to turn it into two pulls. Number one, taking the slack out of the bar. Number two, finishing the pull. If you try and rush it and you're not used to it, then it usually ends up with you just sort of going and yanking the bar off the floor. Okay? So while I demonstrate this, what I would recommend looking at is my knees. My knees are going to push, my body will move, my knees are going to push, and then I will take the bar. Okay? That's it. Alright guys, so last piece is going to be making sure you're pushing with your legs and your hips at the same time. So it's not just legs, it's not just hips. We're certainly not trying to just use our back to just lever it up. That's bad, don't do it. We want to use everything as one unit, just like we would in a real deadlift. So it's very important that you practice that doing the block pull as well. It's actually a really, really good tool for that because it takes out a lot of the mobility restrictions that you would find off the floor. If you want to use straps for accessory work, feel free. No one's going to judge you unless they're a dick. I use it just to save my hands because of how many deadlifts we do. And then for the heavy work off the floor, you just use your hands. Works good. So we're going to hopefully demonstrate what it looks like to use your legs and your hips at the same time. So it should be sort of a scissor lift closing together kind of thing. And at the top, you're only really going until your hips have locked out. So as soon as your hips are done, that's it. You don't have to lever back into it like Brooke used to. So again, same stance, same grip, same bracing. Pushing through the legs, driving the hips in. Should feel it all working, quads, hamstrings, and glutes. Easy as that. Alright guys, there you have it. Hopefully a few tips to help you deadlift and your block pull. You can apply a lot of that stuff to the deadlift. It's not just off the block pull. Again, the block pull itself should pretty much be a deadlift, just that much higher off the floor. So all the stuff you're doing here is going to pay the same dividends if you do it off the floor for a full deadlift. Any questions, let us know. Anything you would like us to talk about or make a video on, any particular lift or technique, let us know down below and we'll try and get to it when we can. Thanks guys.
Yeah.